Hey, good Sunday to you folks. As promised, we are back. And today on the farm, we are going to make a Nebraska favorite that's kind of only found here in Nebraska. It's called a Runza. And it's a type of kind of a meat pocket sandwich. Every ethnicity has theirs. The Spanish have the empanadas and so on and so on. I don't know a lot of the other names. But in Nebraska, you're going to find a Runza, and it's spelled R-U-N-Z-A. But the German spelling is R-U-N-S-A. They have restaurants here in Nebraska called Runza, and you pretty much only find them in Nebraska. And the Runza restaurant was started in 1949 in Lincoln, Nebraska by some German immigrants who made their way to the United States by way of Russia, I guess. But I've been eating Runzas for years as we came out and visited our family out here in Nebraska. But I always loved the homemade version better. I really never cared for the commercially offered sandwich at the Runza store. And I know a lot of old school Nebraskans might hate me for that, but to me, homemade's always better. But like I said, years ago we started coming here, and my cousin at her restaurant had an employee that would make those, and my mom, when she was here, would always request those, and they would be made. So we started making them ourselves when I started going back home from visits. We'd get a craving for Runza, so I was like, well, I want to start making these so I know how to make them. So we came up with a recipe, and I knew the basic ingredients were ground beef, cabbage, and then I started adding stuff of my own. Some of them even use sauerkraut in them, but I don't go that far. But I started adding ingredients that I enjoyed, and we came up with a really good recipe. And over the past few years, when I've been coming to Nebraska before we moved here, we used to always get together on one of the days we were here and make a bunch of them as a family. So been trying to get together with my cousins this year and make them, but they're crazy busy, and it seems like there's been several waves of different sicknesses, colds, flus, everything else going through the family. So we were actually supposed to do them yesterday, but some of the family got sick, so we did not get together. But we're still going to make them today, and we'll show you how to do them. Kelly's home today. So I've already got the bread made. You can see it here. And this is just our standard Portuguese sweet bread that we started using for the Runza recipe that we really like. It's kind of like the Hawaiian bread flavor. In fact, Hawaiian bread came from the Portuguese when they moved there. So there's a recipe on this, and I already have a video on this, and I'll link it at the end of this video so you'll have the bread recipe. It's on its second rise, so while it's rising, we're cooking the filling. So over here on the stove, we have 2 pounds of ground beef that we're browning. And I put a little water in there because the ground beef was still frozen. But that water is going to cook out and help cook some of the other ingredients that we're going to throw in there. I'm going to leave the lid off now so we can cook this, and some of that water will come out. So we're going to prep the next ingredients that we're going to put in this, and we'll come back and see you then. Okay, we've increased the heat underneath the ground beef because we're going to cook some of that water out of it and get it to brown, kind of caramelize. But while we're doing that, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of dry thyme because I want that moisture in there to kind of rehydrate that thyme. And then once the water's boiled out, the fat that's left in the pan will actually pull much more of that flavor of that thyme out of there. And that's kind of our secret ingredient to our dish, is the thyme. If you can remember, I got kind of a love affair with that herb. So we're going to let that cook down a little bit. And I've also chopped 1 onion per pound of meat. So we got 2 onions here. And we're going to sweat those onions out. And then again, when that water boils out of there, the onions will start to caramelize a little bit. We have our onions in. And that liquid's cooking off nicely. I'm going to add about 3 cloves worth of chopped garlic, and we'll get that stirred in a little bit. You can see we're getting down to where the liquid's pretty, we're almost gone. So we're ready to start cutting up our cabbage. I have a small head of cabbage here. You can see it's even smaller than the big as my hand here. So I'm going to cut this quarter-wise, and then we'll trim out this the hard core out of it, and then we'll just slice it thin. We're not even going to chop it. We'll just make it thin, and then it's going to cook down and almost disappear into that meat. Everything's browning really nicely in our pot, and it's starting to caramelize. We've got our cabbage sliced up really thin. You can see how thin it is. And it's probably our favorite yellow Pyrex bowl full, so that'll kind of also give you an idea of how much to use. And then whenever we're ready here, we're going to dump this cabbage in. I don't think this whole bowl of cabbage is going to fit because it'll kind of be heaped over, so we'll probably add it in a couple installments, because if you've ever cooked cabbage before, you know that it cooks way down. So this is going to be probably a quarter of the volume once this cabbage cooks down. So I mentioned that every ethnicity has their own meat pie or folded meat sandwich. I believe the Italian is what is that, babe? The calzone?
Calzone or panzerotti, depending on how it's made.
Calzone or panzerotti. So I'd be interested in finding out, whatever nationality you are, what your meat pie is. Leave that in the comments, because that'd be super interesting. I know the Portuguese version is like a pastéis de carne, which is basically meat pastry. It's a little bit close to Spanish, as you might have known. Some people even call them an empanada, which is very close to the empanada. The Portuguese language, if you compare it with Spanish, a lot of times they just cut the end off of the word. Like in Spanish, the word for one would be uno. In Portuguese, it would be un. Just kind of like a lazy Spanish. I also encourage you to do what I did, and if you're going to make this recipe, make it my way if you want, but make it your own too. Because I put in the flavors that I enjoy into it, and it just so happens that everybody liked it. But if you wanted to heat it up, you could heat it up with some peppers or some crushed red pepper or cayenne or something like that. Or different herbs that you may like some rosemary or something, or some sage. Or use a couple different kinds of meat, or mix in some sausage. Go crazy with it. These are also going to have cheese in them when we make them. So you could experiment with different kinds of cheese, like a pepper jack or, whatever you like. Our hamburger is starting to brown, and when I say brown hamburger, most people think brown hamburger is just till it's not red anymore, but you need to brown it to where it starts like sticking to the pan, and you get that Maillard effect, which gives you a lot more flavor. And we're just on the verge of this starting to stick to the pan, so we're going to keep cooking until we get some nice brown bits on the bottom of this pan and develop that flavor. And then what we'll do is we'll put in about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of water reintroduced back into the mix. I know it sounds silly because we just cooked it all out. But what that cold water will do is it'll bring all that flavor up to the bottom of the pan. And it's also going to help break down our cabbage, because that steam will cook it a lot quicker and it'll break down. And eventually that water cooks back out again. So it's not a problem. You could also use stock. That would work well too, and also add a little flavor. So there's another idea for you. Another thing you can do is add more or different vegetables. You can add mushrooms, green peppers, whatever your fancy is. You could maybe cut up some fennel bulb or something like that. You could also put a little fennel seed in there if you like the taste of kind of like Italian sausage or something like that. That's the main flavor in Italian sausage, is a little bit of fennel. I don't use that because Kelly hates fennel, and we don't need it in the mix, so we don't go there. But change it up. Add stuff, subtract stuff, whatever, like we said. Now you're going to see those little brown bits sticking to the bottom of the pan? That's all flavor. So you see it there now. Let's pour in this half a cup of water. And then we'll stir that around. And you'll see all those little brown bits will come up. See that? See how the bottom of the pan's clean again? That's what any cold liquid does. We're probably going to add another half a cup. We still got to get this side of the pan over here. So the other half a cup was perfect. Got all that back up off the bottom. So add a full cup of water if you need it. So we're going to start adding our cabbage in installments, and I'll come back when we got some of that in the pan. We've added about 3/4 of the cabbage. So now we're going to put the lid on and let that steam, and that'll help break down that cabbage. You can see how much that cabbage has cooked down already. So we're going to add the final installment of our cabbage and get that cooking down as well. And there's liquid that comes out of the cabbage, so you don't have to add any more liquid to keep producing the steam. There's quite a bit of moisture in cabbage. We are coming right along. That second installment of cabbage is cooking down. I went ahead and added a full teaspoon of salt. You can use seasoned salt if you'd like. And probably about a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. And then when this gets close to being done, we will, of course, re-taste it for our seasonings and adjust as necessary. Remember, salt adds flavor. The salt also helps bring out the moisture in that cabbage as well. So we'll bring you back when this is completely done. Our cabbage is cooked all the way down. We have a little bit of liquid in the bottom. So I'm going to let that cook out a little bit, and then we'll start tasting it for seasoning. Probably going to have to add some more salt and pepper, but we will see. So we've been cooking on medium until we threw the cabbage in, and then I turned it down to a simmer. So I'm leaving it on the simmer now and let some of this moisture come out. And we'll come back when we're completely done. Alright, we are done. We've got the fire turned off on that. I'm going to kind of open up the middle a little bit so it cools down maybe a little quicker. So we're going to let that cool to almost room temperature. I've got a bunch of cheese sliced, really thin, about 1/8 of an inch thick. And then our bread has risen double. So we are ready to rock. Okay, we are off to the races. We've punched our bread down. We've got our Pampered Chef like pie pastry roller mat out. We're rolling everything out to about the 6-inch mark, and we're peeling off about, I would say, either a large apricot or tangerine size piece of bread, and rolling it into a ball. And then you flour it up and roll it out. And then I bring them over here to Kelly, who's using our fancy little press thing here. She puts a piece of cheese down, puts a, what number scooper is that, babe?
20.
The number 20 disher. And she puts the number 20 disher of meat in there, and then she moistens half of the mold, and then she squeezes it together and crimps it. And then she puts it over here on a cookie sheet lined with parchment, just like that. We've got the oven preheated to 350. These should take around 20 minutes, but we'll tell you what they do when we pull them out. Your traditional Runzas are like rectangular, but we have these little presses and we like using them. We have 3 different sizes to make these pies with, and we use the largest size. So we're going to continue putting these things together, and then we're going to throw these in the oven, and when they come out of the oven, we'll brush them with some melted butter, and we'll show you what that looks like when we're completed. Now, normally with the bread dough, if you're making whatever type of bread you're making, you would let it rise after you formed it into whatever shape you were cooking, whether it be a loaf or a bun or whatever. Doing this, you do not have to allow the bread to rise. You go ahead and make them and then put them in the oven. So we're like a pan ahead, so we stopped. You don't want to get too far ahead, otherwise the bread rises too much. It'll rise plenty during the cooking process. Now, the next thing I want to discuss is cheese. The normal cheese that people put in these is Velveeta cheese. And I do tolerate Velveeta cheese in these homemade ones. But I don't consider Velveeta to be cheese. I like real cheese. We're using Colby Jack. And when you place your Runzas on the cookie sheet to be cooked, make sure that your cheese is on the top, so as it melts down through the filling. Now, you don't have to put cheese in these if you're not a cheese fan. You can go with just the meat and the cabbage mixture. So when we pull the first one out of the oven, we'll let you take a look at it. We have our first batch out of the oven. Took 25 minutes at 350 degrees. And as soon as you get them out of the oven, brush a little butter on top of them, just like that. Makes them look pretty. Keeps the tops from drying out too. Kelly did a fantastic job filling and folding those. So we'll do the rest of these, and we'll come back when they're all done. Alright, to show you what you can do if you don't have one of those little fancy crimper thingies that we have for making our pies, Kelly's going to show you the old school way to do it. This is actually our very last Runza. So she put her cheese down, she's going to spread her meat out a little bit, and then fold her over. She forgot to do the water, but I think that'll be okay.
It feels wetter now.
So then she's just going to take a fork, like you would with any kind of meat pie, and go around the outside. Like my grandma used to do when she made fried pies. And that's all there is to it. Alright, there's the last ones on the cooling rack right there. This recipe makes 20 to 24 Runzas. So we're going to get one of these cut open and show you what it looks like. And Kelly, you're going to have a couple for dinner. And then the rest of them, they freeze really well. So we'll put a few in the freezer. That works out really well, because if you want one for lunch, you can throw it in your lunch box. And it'll be thawed out by lunchtime. And you can eat it cold, or you can warm it in the microwave, or whatever. But super yummy dish. And I can't wait to dig in. See you in a minute. Alright folks, the moment of truth. Here we go. Ooh, look at that amazing thing. Ooey gooey. Here, let me have one. Cheers. Ooh, so good. It's got the sweetness of that sweet bread dough, kind of like Hawaiian bread. And then the cheese is all melted down into the filling. Fantastic flavor on the filling. We did add a little garlic powder or garlic salt towards the end, because Kelly wanted a little bit more garlic salt after she tasted it. But super good. Look at that. It's what I remember. So remember, we're going to put the sweetbread recipe up here, but you can use any of your favorite bread dough, will work just fine. In a pinch, you could use like the rolled crescent dough out of the refrigerator, but that would get really expensive. Or the French bread dough in the tube from Pillsbury or whatever, if you weren't very good at bread making. But I really recommend you try making bread. It's not that hard. Check out that video. We're going to link to this. So until next time, we love you guys. Stay safe, stay healthy. We're having Runza for dinner. Love you. Bye.